Peace, y'all. Peace. Welcome back to another crucial breakdown. It's your boy, Vinny L. Vinny the Moor. And today, I have some general educational information to provide. Doing my research today, I work a 9 to 5 like everybody else. I'm still in the matrix, as some people would say. I'm still gathering my bearings and trying to figure out how to navigate these waters that I found myself in. I think we all need to, cut the ego and be truthful about where we're coming from and what we're trying to do. We all have goals in mind, goals not only for ourselves, but for the collective. Goals that we want for other people we care for, people we see on a day to day. Ultimately, this is about bettering your fellow man. You know, I have a little little information I always go to in these situations. For example, this brother here. Now, Prince Uriel Bey. If you guys have never heard of Prince Uriel Bey, this brother here wrote The Consecrated Talisman, Moorish American Society of Comprehensive Science, Living Conjugation, Codicis, Incantamentum, the Manual of Spells. All right, the beer, Uriel Bey. Okay, very deep brother. All right, if you ever get a chance, he has a YouTube video. He has a couple of videos out on YouTube you can check out. He has a book as well, a few books you can purchase. This one's on PDF. As you see, Moorish American Society. All right. Magnify Allah with love. All right. Very, very great book that talks about a lot of things. I wanted to just go down what he talks about in this literature, because he talks about some interesting points about history, right? A lot of this is very important. If you ever get the chance, please, please, please look into this piece of literature. It's very informative. All right. Here we go. Let's see. Authority is derived through election by the people of public officials best fitted to represent them. Attitude toward property is respect for laws, individual rights, and a sensible economic procedure. Attitude toward law is again the administration of justice in accord with fixed principles and established evidence with a strict regard to consequences. Avoids the dangerous extreme of either tyranny or mobocracy. Results in statesmanship, liberty, reason, justice, contentment, and progress. Taking out of the training manual during Franklin Delano Roosevelt's administration. So this is a major claim here. We read about the 1928 War Department training manual, right? And how this term was taken out. This is what this brother is claiming. Throughout so-called time, Moors have always formulated laws for a republic form of government. The laws of this form of government were known to have been developed for the first families or patricians / nobles. Coming from the genetrix or Moabitis mother or mitochondria DNA gene, these families were known as gentes, and their laws occasionally referred to as Puritan laws, created primarily to protect the families and their property lands, etc. Gentisis, clan, family, race, nation. Their Moorish descendants have since been known to history as gentlemen, as contrasted to the less distinguished plebe, masses, or plebs, common persons, as the freedmen or non-Gentiles, Negroes, were known. Plebe, common herd. The Latin gentilis meant belonging to the same clan or gentes, gens, genes. The European nations, claiming themselves to be descendants of the gentilis, adopted this system from the Moorish antecedents, the gentes, later calling themselves sobriquet gentilhomme in France and as gentlemen, later aristocrats in England. So peep the claim here, how these this ancient patrician versus or patrician nobleman versus plebei masses, this obvious schism that occurred in these ancient days. Uh, Later, the European nations would claim themselves to be descendants of the gentilists or the noblemen, would adopt this system from the Moorish antecedents. Now, this is a key word. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people now. I don't like to assume people know what they're talking about because many times they don't. You know, we need to be clear. A thing or event that existed before or logically precedes another. It's a precursor, a forerunner, a predecessor, a progenitor. Okay. Now, in this terminology, they adopted this system from the Moorish predecessors, the noblemen. Now, what people seem to assume here, a lot of the times when they see this kind of information, is they assume that this implies a blood tie, right? People start talking about bloodlines and blood ties, and oh, these are Europeans. You know, Moors are Europeans, and you know what I'm saying. They lying with the enemy, essentially, right? But we've already had this commentary about ancestry, though, and the fact that each person has over what you go back every generation 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128. These are your direct ancestors. 128 people. You keep flipping, you keep doubling, right? Right. So who are you directly blood linked to? These kind of arguments are fugazi. You know, we already know that you can't tell a man's nationality simply by looking at him. Let's be honest. Let's continue. These privileges, arrogated by the first families, the Moorish gentlemen, became a source of constant criticism and contention for the masses. The essential difference between the two classes was that the patricians, or gentilest gentlemen, knew who their families were, and the plebs, who paid little attention to such niceties, did not. Because of their family records, the patrician nobles were able to hand down their property to their heirs, while the plebs, even if they prospered, had no family records with which to protect their holdings. This fundamental distinction led to demands of the plebs that the government intervene to support them through government, legislative, parliamentary enactments. The stern family discipline of the Moorish patricians, which enabled them to continue their family lines, was steadily battered by the rapidly multiplying plebs, whose mathematical proliferation and willingness to endure a lower standard of living resulted in their greatly outnumbering the patricians. Under this pressure, the great landed estates were broken up into smaller, individually held parcels of property. This was the result of government infiltration and the watering down of the family or constitutional law enhanced by the jus civile. The parallels of these accounts surely must enable you to see more clearly the current situation at hand concerning your or our inheritance. So again, this is the story of the great masses, basically mobocracy in this instance, where you have the common people who really don't know any better and don't understand and do not, and obviously cannot prosper for a time of longevity, mainly due to the fact that they do not recognize their forefathers. However, the current civil law, giving birth to limited statutory civil rights for a plebeian federal citizen, derived its name from the outcome of the centuries of struggle between the patricians and the plebs, when the plebs insisted upon a law which granted them more congressionally granted privileges as civil law. In 471 BC, the plebs celebrated their final triumph with the establishment of the tribunes as the plebeian, proletariat, Negro, communist, democratic expression of their newfound power or triumph in Rome and later Moorish America concerning the breaking up of landed estates, rightfully belonging to the Moorish patricians, gentlemen, and their heirs. Currently, contrary to the constitutional stern precepts of our founding fathers, the said law-giving bodies are frequently referred to as tribunals, as recognition of the triumph of the plebs in ancient Rome/Moor in 471 BC equals 12 tables of Rome, for you know numerology, USC, United States Code, hence a watering down of constitutional law. Such machinations gave rise to mortmain, a term applied to denote the alienation of lands or tenements to any corporation, sole, aggregate, ecclesiastical, or temporal, for lands to become perpetually inherent in one dead hand, a banker's dream and a citizen's nightmare. So he just said a mouthful right here. Let's look deeper into this term, mortmain. All right. The status of lands or tenements held inalienably by an ecclesiastical or other corporation, right? Probably alluding to impersonal ownership. All to make you a tenant in your own land, so as to say or imply that your blood is tainted. Thus there can be no pure inheritance, per defectum sanguinis. Foreign lords versus native-born population, the people have become known as boarders or villains, a villain of the lowest rank. Lien, of course, meaning encumbrance, hindrance, old man of the sea, onus, burden, prophylactic, condom. From gentilis to genitals. A condom or a lien must be placed on the genitals so as to interfere with the natural blood law. This is to confirm that there has been a disturbance in the atmosphere of inheritance. Moors who sleep. Okay. Let's reread that. A very intricate statement. All right, I'm gonna read from 38 to 40. All right, all to make you a tenant in your own land, so as to say or imply that your blood is tainted. Your tenant tainted. Your blood is tainted. Thus, there can be no pure inheritance. Foreign lords versus native-born population of people have become known as boarders or villains. A villain of the lowest rank. Right? We're the villains. Lien, of course, meaning encumbrance, a hindrance. Old man of the sea, onus, burden. It must be placed on the genitals so as to interfere with the natural blood law. Right? So we're talking about bloodline inheritance here. All right? In order for that to occur, there has to be some type of lien, right? To interfere. Let's continue. Moors who sleep on their rights have none. The limit of police power and legislative authority has been reached when a statutory law attempts to derogate or destroy a divine right protected by the Constitution for national citizens. The limit has been reached. Moors who sleep on their rights have none. All right, this is just a little bit of information from this brother's book. You know, he also has some more that I wanted to drop right quick. You know, he talks about herbology, colon cleansers, the prophet, of course, Noble Drew Ali, speaking about the history. But he does have some information regarding the history of some of our most notable past. No, it's by the captain. No. Trust it will be the king of corporate takeover. Yeah, there's. All right. I think. Now let's talk about money right here. I want to talk about the history because the brother Uriel Bey, you know, for those who do not know, you know, he set up his own Admorium. You know, he set up his own nation. You know, this brother was advanced in his practice of Moorish science and was very in depth and very detailed in his work. All right, here we go. Okay, here we go. All right. So here we're talking about Federal Reserve banks. We're talking about money here, but we're also talking about the finances, the economic history that we all need to know about in order for us to understand what we're getting into when we're talking about money in the U.S. federal system. Let's begin. As we take an even more in-depth scope into the unrestricted said money monopoly, we find that the Federal Reserve banking system is not the first private banking monopoly in America. Its predecessor was the Bank of the United States, introduced by Secretary of Treasury and double agent Alexander Hamilton in 1790 under a bill introduced to the House of Representatives to have Congress grant a charter to the private bank to gain control over America's finances. Now, talking about Alexander Hamilton, Secretary of Treasury and double agent Alexander Hamilton, had a few little bit of information on Hamilton, right? This is Mises.org, Mises Institute, Austrian Economics, Freedom and Peace. Very interesting. They talk a lot of libertarian points, right? They have a lot of constitutionalists who speak. But what I wanted to talk about, though, is Hamilton. Now, here we go. The fundamental cleavage. In the economic sphere, Jefferson was not, we talk about Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was not anti-capitalist. As his enemies charged, he believed in genuine freedom of enterprise, unencumbered by government regulation or grants of monopoly privilege. His opposition to paper money and the central bank were based on profound insight into the then new science of economics. Jefferson's almost unknown writings on banking, money, and depressions demonstrate that he was head and shoulders over the allegedly practical men who opposed him. What has since been interpreted as the anti-capitalist rhetoric was simply expression on Jefferson's part of a personal preference for the soil and distaste for the life of the cities. The importance of the Jefferson-Hamilton struggle has been unfortunately obscured. It is a struggle which, in one form or another, has continued to mark our country. Hamilton and the Federalists believed in ever-expanding power of the federal government, a myriad of governmental regulations, controls, and special privileges in economic life, the crushing of the states and limiting the rights of the individual. Their idea was the British model, a strong monarch ruling the country on behalf of the general welfare. Failing the adoption of a monarch, a strong president to act as a benevolent despot. In foreign affairs, the Federalists looked to the British Empire as friend and ally. Sound familiar? Hamiltonian federalism was in the profoundest sense un-American. It represented a conscious harking back to the imperial British mode, a retention of the typically European forms of strong central government and semi-socialist planned economy. Our Constitution was forged as a compromise between the Jefferson and Hamilton forces, with James Madison acting as the internal tightrope walker and fence straddler between the two camps. The trappings, the rhetoric, the specific issues have changed, but the fundamental cleavage remains unresolved on the American scene. This article was originally published March 1951. Very interesting article. But I just wanted to talk about that just to break down more of what Brother Bey was telling us about the Secretary of Treasury and double agent Alexander Hamilton. Even before the first Bank of the United States was unlawfully granted a charter in 1791, the international moneylenders and the directors of the Bank of England, by using the good old reliable joint stock trust company principle, appointed their hireling Alexander Hamilton to represent their interest in the United States. In 1780, this individual, a supposed patriot, the guy who was on the $10 bill, proposed the establishment of the federal bank. It was to be owned by private interests as an alternative to those who insisted that the issue and control of money should remain in the hands of the government elected by the people. Hamilton suggested that his proposed federal bank be capitalized for $12 million. The Bank of England would provide the other 2/3. In European funds and landed securities, roughly $10 million. The remaining $2 million would be allocated to wealthy people in America. In 1783, Alexander Hamilton and his business partner Robert Morris organized the Bank of America as financial superintendent of the Continental Congress. Morris was able to reduce the U.S. Treasury to a state of indigence by the end of the 7 Years' War. This is another illustration of how the secret power used wars to further their plan for a world revolutionary movement. All right, incredible. This is basically information that is staking claim of how the U.S. has been usurped from the beginning. That even at the beginning of the inception of the Constitution, there was a split between socialist ideals and anti-government individualism. All right. To make absolutely certain the United States financial cupboard was bare, Hamilton transferred the last $250,000 from the Treasury Department and invested it in the bank's capital stock. The directors of the Bank of North America, which incidentally was the predecessor to both the Bank of the United States as well as the Bank of New York, organized during the Revolutionary War along with the Pennsylvania Bank. However, the Bank of New York was Hamilton Alexander's first proposal for a self-interest bank charter, and in 1784, Hamilton joined with Isaac Roosevelt, great-great-granddaddy to the 1933 bankruptcy private issue lender, New Deal Democracy May, Franklin Delano, and others to create the Bank of New York. The initial meeting of the Bank of New York was held March 15, 1784, and to no surprise amongst the directors who were present, of course, were Alexander and Isaac Roosevelt. Hamilton staunchly opposed Thomas Jefferson and the Jeffersonian Republic tradition in American politics and was connected with the Bank of New York from the start. In truth, the Constitution of the Bank of New York was written by Alexander Hamilton. Again, if you go to New York City, man, you'll see it, man. I don't know if any of y'all in New York City, you know what I'm saying? You'll find it when you go down to these financial districts. The truth is out there for all of us to see. In truth, the Constitution of the Bank of New York was written. Again, the basis of these private banks, particularly the Bank of the United States, which was proposed after the bankers' scheme to get Hamilton into office, was to circumvent the fixed money powers of Congress in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5, and Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1. The capital and deposits of the Hamilton proposed Bank of the United States were to be exempt from taxation, have the sole right to issue so-called money, and the United States government was to be ultimately responsible for the bank's actions. Hamilton's proposal was referred to a Senate committee, but this committee included Philip Schuyler, Hamilton's father-in-law, and all its members shared Hamilton's political views. In brief, the committee was stacked. President Washington then referred the bill to Thomas Jefferson, Secretary of State, and Edmund Randolph. Both found it to be unconstitutional. Jefferson's opinions of unconstitutionality of the bank included the following powerful argument, quote, I consider the foundation of the Constitution as laid upon this ground, that all powers not to be delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states or to the people. To take a single step beyond the boundaries thus specifically drawn around the powers of Congress is to take possession of a boundless field of power no longer susceptible of any definition. The bill delivers us upbound to the National Bank, who are free to refuse all arrangements but on their own terms, and the public government not free on such refusal to employ any other bank. Long before the perpetually existing Federal Reserve monopoly, private banks like the Bank of the United States were generally erected into corporations for 20, 30-year periods, during which time no other banks, public or private, were to be permitted. Interesting. This limited corporation lifespan created a constant knot in a proverbial thread that would ultimately be used in latter years for the International League of Nations, United Nations, Bank of International Settlements, Bank of Reconstruction and Development, International Monetary Fund, continued and perpetual world monetary domination imposed upon the people by and through the command of their agreed upon law, merchant code, and principle. All right, understand what this brother is dropping here. These are jewels. All right, I don't know how else to say it. Let's continue. I'll let the work speak for itself. The charter for the first bank. This is the history right here. You got to know the history of the economic system if you're going to even attempt to try to get over on it or try to set it right. Right? I mean, I just mean. The charter for the first bank expired in 1811, and Congress refused to grant a new charter on the grounds of unconstitutionality. By this time, President James Madison's message repeated the argument on the unconstitutionality of the bank and made the following comment, quote, on the whole, it is considered that the proposed establishment will, 1, enjoy a monopoly of the profits of a national bank for a period of 20 years, 2, that the monopolized profits will be continually growing with the progress of a national population and wealth, 3, that the nation will, during the same period, be dependent on the notes of the bank for the species of circulating medium whenever the precious metal may be wanted, and 4, at all times will the nation be dependent on the notes of the bank for so much thereof as may be an eligible substitute for a species of medium. And lastly, 5, that the extensive employment of the banknotes and collection of the augmented taxes will moreover enable the banks greatly to extend its profitable issues of them without the expense of specie capital to support their circulation. It's a mouthful, right? So they want to, one, so let's break it down. They want to, one, enjoy a monopoly of the profits, right? They enjoy a monopoly of the profits of the national bank, right? The profits will continually grow, right? The nation will be dependent on the notes, right? Because there's going to be no precious metals. Without precious metals, there's really no way. Without precious metals, there really is no way to make trade. You know, to have well, I won't say that. You know, it's more about having a standard of value that you can rely upon. Okay, and what this did is these notes would become the circulation would be circulated, and these notes would become a substitute for the standards of value, but ultimately it was backed by nothing. All right, they would have for the nation would be dependent upon the notes. They will become a substitute. The employment of the banknotes, they will be able to expend the issues of them. They will not be able to support their circulation. The capital or coin money will not be able to support it. The War of 1812 presented bank supporters with a new argument. Financial distress brought about by the war required financial relief in the form of a national bank. Under these pressing circumstances, the House and the Senate passed a bill creating the Second Bank of the United States. James Madison sold out and signed the bill into law April 10th, 1816. We talk about James Madison. We know who James Madison is, right? Right? Put down your James Madison, right? James Madison. That man, right? Fourth president, 1809 to 1817. It fits, right? 1811, the War of 1811, right? Isn't this when this supposedly happened? Right? What is he best known for? His work on the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Was he a Democrat or Republican? What was his greatest achievement? He supervised the purchase. Okay. Main achievement. Ratification of federal papers. Dubbed the father of the Constitution. Okay. So we talking about brother here. Sold out. President James Madison. He sold out. The original charter for the Second Bank of the United States was limited in time, unlike, again, the present Federal Reserve System. It would seem somebody got smart. A new charter for the Second Bank of the United States to replace the expiring grant was passed by Congress in July 1832. Notice the years. Notice how the years are lining up. Notice how it's 1832. It's 20 years after 1812, right? And President Andrew Jackson promptly vetoed the charter. Andrew Jackson vetoed the charter. Now, I don't know about y'all. This guy is probably one of my favorite presidents, mainly because of how interesting he is. Mr. Andrew Jackson, soldier statement, 7th president, 1829, 1837, 1832. It lines up. Again, he gained fame as a general. Why is he so important? He was the most contentious president. He started as a military hero, wrote his fame and a populist message, sought to empower the executive branch of government while respecting states' rights. What good things did he accomplish? He led the U.S. forces in the Creeks. We killed Native Americans, right? Served as the main founder of the modern Democratic Party. Handled a crushing defeat to the British. So let's continue here. He promptly vetoed the charter, because Jackson don't play that, with an emphatic message of major historical interest. Andrew Jackson was clearly prophetic in his warnings and arguments to the American people. In his first inaugural address in January 1832, Jackson stated his position on the bank and renewal of the charter. Quote, as the charter of the Bank of the United States will expire in 1836, and its stockholders will most probably apply for a renewal of their privileges in order to avoid the evils resulting from precipitancy In a measure involving such important principles and such deep pecuniary interests, I feel that I cannot, in justice to our constituents and to the parties interested too soon present it to the deliberate consideration of the legislature and the people. The constitutionality of this law has been well questioned, because it grants to those who hold stock exclusive privileges of a dangerous tendency. Its expediency is denied by a large portion of our citizens, and it's believed none will deny that it has failed in the great end of our establishing a uniform and sound currency throughout the states. Andrew Jackson's personal view on the second bank of the United States is contained in a memorandum in Jackson's own handwriting, written in January 1832. The opinion shows how far present constitutional interpretation has diverged from the intent of our founding patricians. Jackson's opening argument is that all, quote, sovereign power is in the people and the states. And then he argues that in cases such as the power to grant corporations, where the power is not expressly given to the general government, then no sovereign power not expressly granted can be exercised by implication. The key is implied powers. There are no implied powers in the Constitution. Powers delegated do not equate to powers surrendered. Jackson goes on to argue that it may be possible for a necessity to give power to grant charters to banks and corporations, but this must be a positive necessity, not a feigned one. And then only within the 10 square miles of Washington, D.C. itself does Congress have such sovereign power. Jackson argues as follows: it is inconsistent with any of the powers granted that our government should form a corporation and become a member of it, as pointed out later in the Supreme Court case of Osborne versus the Bank of the United States in 1924. The founders were too well aware of the corrupting influence of a great moneyed monopoly upon government to legalize such a corrupting monster by any grant, either express or implied, in the Constitution. By 1833, the struggle of the rechartering of the Bank of the United States had degenerated into a conflict between Andrew Jackson and the bank agent secretary of the Treasury, William J. Duane. Right, let's check out this guy, William J. Duane. Right, Secretary of the Treasury. Notice something about these Secretary of the Treasuries, man. They're always on the banker's side, ain't they? American politician, lawyer from Pennsylvania. He served a brief term, refused to withdraw with federal deposits from the second bank, led to his dismissal. Woo, so we fired him by President Andrew Jackson. All right. Interesting. Jackson wanted a secretary who would do his bidding. Let's see. Here we go. May 33, the Secretary of the State Department just hoped he could persuade Duane to withdraw the government's deposits from the second bank, which McLean had refused to do so. Duane was opposed to the bank in principle and felt that it was unconstitutional and monopolistic, but he recognized that the sudden removal of the government's funds from the bank would cause a panic, affecting the farmer and the common man, which would plunge the fiscal concerns of the country into chaos. Sound familiar? It sounds familiar, doesn't it? Duane also maintained that he had no right to withdraw the funds without the consent of Congress, which had, in its previous session, declared the bank safe for government deposits. Jackson enlisted the help of his attorney, General Roger B. Taney, to present his argument for the withdrawal of funds to the entire cabinet. Duane still refused to take any action without the consent of Congress. Jackson dismissed him after only 4 months of service, declaring he's either the weakest mortal or the most strange composition I have ever met with. Very interesting. By William J. Duane. He had the struggle over the rechartering of the bank, right? Jackson wanted to withdraw all government deposits from the bank, right? And notice how they painted Andrew Jackson here. Jackson, searching for a secretary who would do his bidding, appointed Duane, right, to withdraw the government's deposits, right? Because that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to withdraw them. He wanted to take them out. Right? But Duane, what did Duane say? He would cause a panic. It would plunge the fiscal concerns of the country into chaos. Why would it do that? To recharter the bank? He wanted to withdraw in a letter. Andrew Jackson expands on his demand for withdrawal of government deposits from the Bank of the United States and proposes that one bank be selected in each of various cities to receive government deposits. State banks with good credit would be preferable to the concentration of government funds in the bank, which was a private monopoly. President Jackson's final message on March 4th, 1837 was unbelievably prophetic in its content, and the last time an American president was sufficiently independent of the elitist power behind the scenes to publicly warn the American citizens of the dangers to their freedom and livelihood. So they're telling you right here, Andrew Jackson was likely the last president. I mean, I honestly think they all was in cahoots with the elitist government overseas. We know what we're talking about. We're talking about them big London cats. But probably the last one to give us a good message, to tell us exactly what's going on. And, you know, just a little bit, some little bit of gems. The last time an American president was sufficiently independent. Here's an excerpt from Jackson's final message to the American people. The distress and alarm which pervaded, that is, the War of 1812, and agitated the whole country when the Bank of the United States waged war upon the people in order to compel them to submit to their demands cannot yet be forgotten. The ruthless and unsparing temper with which whole cities and communities were oppressed, individuals impoverished and ruined, and a scene of cheerful prosperity suddenly changed into one of gloom and dependency, ought to be indelibly impressed on the memory of the people of the United States. If such was the power in a time of peace, what would it not have been in a season of war with an enemy at your door? No nation but the free men of the United States could have come out victorious from such a contest. Yet, if you had not conquered, the government would have passed from the hands of the many to the hands of the few. And this organized money power from its secret conclave would have dictated the choice of your highest officials and compelled you to make peace or war as best suited their own wishes. However, even while Jackson wrote this message to the American people, our government had passed from the hands of the many to the hands of the few. Moreover, the few from the secret conclave were already dictating political choices, boom and slump, and war and peace. Right? If the 1837 Wall Street Panic independent, later you had the famed Justice Roger B. Taney. Interesting. You had the Dred Scott Sanford decision. Taney reversed Craig v. Missouri in the decision of Briscoe v. Kentucky, which upheld the state law authorizing the issuance of banknotes by a state institution. So briefly, 1830 case, much like McCulloch v. Madison, the Supreme Court upheld the Bank of the United States against the states. Craig v. Missouri invoked the constitutional ban on state-issued currency to invalidate loan certificates issued by a state, a decision which severely affected the growth of state banks and encouraged the demand for a central bank. So we're seeing how essentially in these situations, the Supreme Court is manipulating the Constitution and their interpretation of the Constitution in order to give credence to certain decisions that would ultimately push states, this state bank plan that they were trying to set up. Obviously, they were trying to set up, but push it and move more towards a central bank. The Panic of 1837 was aggravated by the Bank of England. The Bank of England in one day threw out all the paper connected with the United States. In other words, in order to refuse any American securities, as shares and loans at this time, unfortunately, were coming from the already and long-time existing Bank of the United States and the then and currently controlled Board of Governors of the Bank of England, to now very easily and deliberately precipitate the Panic of 1837. The goal, of course, was to punish the United States for refusing the central bank to drive down the price of all shares in the financial panic. Such shares then being available for purchase by the moneylenders at a much lower price made the United States ripe for the taking. Guard and use these lessons well, as they are your glaive and divine saber of light, truth, and justice. Remember that banking institutions are more dangerous to liberty than standing armies. I'm going to leave it at that with Prince Uriel Bey's Moorish American Society of Comprehensive Science and Consecrated Talisman, the Living Conjugation, Manual Spells, Codicis, Incantamentum. All right. Please, if you need access, please, y'all know where to hit me. Now, what we're going to do is I wanted to talk about another interesting article. This is Thomas DiLorenzo, okay, and his critics on the Lincoln myth. Now, very interesting article. Let's see what they have to say about Lincoln. Lincoln was a typical example of the humanitarian with the guillotine, a familiar modern reform liberal type whose heart bleeds for and yearns to uplift remote mankind, while he lies to and treats abominably actual people whom he knew. Mm. We know a lot of people like this, a lot of people who, they show love to the masses. They give credence to all the people who supply their fame and fortune. They put on this facade that they are this being of unencumbered brilliance, but in the bedroom and behind closed doors, they ain't really all that they say they are. Let's continue. Ken Masugi is partially right about Tim DiLorenzo's book, The Real Lincoln, a new look at Abraham Lincoln, his agenda, and an unnecessary war. It is awfully good, even great. DiLorenzo has completely and irrevocably destroyed the myth, the legend, the fable, the fairy tale, the tall tale of Abraham Lincoln, America's first military dictator and his first president after the violent regime change of 1861. I predict this book will sell more copies than the word troops at Gettysburg on both sides and will cause a major transformation in American thought, yada, yada, yada. Blah, blah. All right, so this is indictment. Before discussing the reviews and reaction, let's review his findings. He makes about 71 discrete, factual, legal, political, or moral accusations or allegations against or about Lincoln or his subordinates as follows. 1. They say contradictory things before different audiences. They oppose racial equality. They oppose giving blacks the right to vote, serve on juries, or intermarry while allegedly supporting their natural rights. Being a racist. Supporting the legal rights of slaveholders. Supporting Clay's American system or mercantilism as his primary political agenda. A national bank, high tariff, and internal improvements. If you don't know about this word mercantilism, very deep science behind this word. It takes just one looking at the definition wouldn't really tell you what it means. It's a whole system in and of itself. So that's the word you definitely need to know about, though. Supporting a political economy that encourages corruption and inefficiency. Supporting a political economy that became the blueprint for modern America. Wealthy railroad lawyer, being a wealthy railroad lawyer, never defending a runaway slave, defending a slaveholder against his runaway slaves, favoring returning ex-slaves to Africa or sending them to Central America and Haiti, proposing to strengthen the fugitive slave law, opposing the extension of slavery in the territory so that free white people can settle there, and because allowing them to become slaves in states would dilute Republican influence in Congress because of the 3/5 rule. Opposing black citizenship in Illinois or the right to immigrants to that state, failing to use his legendary political skills to achieve peaceful emancipation as well accomplished elsewhere. Lincoln's War was the only war of emancipation in the 19th century. Nullifying emancipation of slaves in Missouri and Georgia early in the war, stating that his primary motive was saving the Union and not ending slavery. Supporting a conscription law. Sending troops into New York City to quell draft riots related to his Emancipation Proclamation, resulting in 300 to 1,000 deaths. Starting a war that took the lives of 620,000 soldiers and 50,000 civilians and caused incalculable economic loss, being an enemy of free market capitalism, being an economic illiterate, and espousing the labor theory of value. Supporting a disastrous public works project in Illinois, and continuing to support the same policies oblivious of the consequences. It's never ending. Illegal blockading ports, illegal suspending habeas corpus, illegally imprisoning thousands of northern citizens, tolerating their subjugation to inhumane conditions in prison, ignoring the 9th and 10th Amendments, supporting a law that indemnified public officials for unlawful acts, burning and plundering southern cities, executing those who refuse to take a loyalty oath, creating an enormous political patronage system, effectively killing secession as a threat, thus encouraging the rise of our modern federal monolith. All right, shoot the messenger. DiLorenzo makes over 70 separate allegations against or about Lincoln or as part of his overall case against Lincoln. What do DiLorenzo's reviewers say about these allegations? They say very little. Instead of dealing with these charges, the opponents spent most of their efforts attacking a few citations. All right, let's see. I have no purpose to introduce political and social equality between the white and black races. There's a physical difference between the two, which in my judgment will probably forever forbid their living together upon the footing of perfect equality. I am in favor of the race to which I belong having a superior position. And here's some more that are not, I believe, in the book. One, what I would most desire would be the separation of the white and black races. I will to the very last stand by the law of the state, which forbids the marrying of white people with Negroes. Beyond these procedural points, the reviews are filled mostly with insults, irrelevancies. Basically, you got a brother in this book, about how this whole Lincoln myth is a lie. It's all of it. Let's see. In the days of Abraham Lincoln, okay, here, let me call as my final witness on Lincoln's influence on the progressives, the great man himself, Theodore Roosevelt. What say you, sir? In the days of Abraham Lincoln, the Republican Party was founded as a radical progressive party of the nation. It remained the nationalist as against the particularist or state rights party. And insofar it remained absolutely sound. For little permanent good can be done by any party which worships the state's rights fetish, or which fails to regard the state, like the country or the municipality, as merely a convenient unit for local self-government, while in all national matters of importance to the whole people, the nation is to be supreme over state, county, and town alike. As to all action of this kind, there have long been two schools of political thought, upheld with equal sincerity. The course I followed of regarding the executive as subject only to the people, and under the Constitution, bound to serve the people affirmatively in cases where the Constitution does not explicitly forbid him to render service, was substantially the course followed by both Andrew Jackson and Abraham Lincoln. When I was inaugurated on March 4th, 1905, I wore a ring. Lincoln's secretary, John Hay, sent me the evening before containing the hair of Abraham Lincoln. I often therefore told John Hay that when I wore such ring on such occasion, I bound myself more than ever to treat the Constitution after the manner of Abraham Lincoln, as a document which puts human rights above property rights when the two conflicted. I believed in invoking the national power with absolute freedom for every national need. Interesting. Invoking the national power with absolute freedom. Think about that statement. What does he mean by national? What power? Where does power come from? All right. Talk about the Republican National Platform. All right, let's talk about the Republican National Platform. All right. Adopted at Chicago in 1860. Resolved, we, the delegated representatives of the Republican electors of the United States and convention assembled in discharge of the duty we owe to our constituents and our country, unite in the following declarations. That to the union of the states, this nation owes its unprecedented increase in population, its surprising development of material sources, its rapid augmentation of wealth, its happiness at home, and its honor abroad. That while providing revenue for the support of the general government by duties upon imports, sound policy requires such an adjustment of these imposts as to encourage the development of the industrial interests of the whole country. Wait, what? While providing revenue for the support of the general government by duties upon imports, sound policy requires such an adjustment of these imposts as to encourage the development of the industrial interests of the whole country. We commend that the policy of national exchanges, which secures to the working men liberal wages, to agricultural remunerative prices, to mechanics and manufacturers an adequate reward for the skilled labor and enterprise, and to the national commercial prosperity and independence. That appropriations by Congress for river and harbor improvements of a national character required for the accommodation and security of an existing commerce are authorized by the Constitution and justified by the obligations of government to protect the lives and properties of the citizens. Where? Where does it say that? That a railroad to the Pacific Ocean is imperatively demanded by the interests of the whole country, that the federal government ought to render immediate and efficient aid in its construction, and that, as preliminary thereto, a daily overland mail should be promptly established. Here we see explicitly stated Lincoln's economic agenda, emphasized by De Lorenzo and essentially ignored by his critics. High tariff, internal improvements in the transcontinental railroad. Paragraph also lends support to the view that the opponents of secession had an explicitly economic agenda. To the Union are attributed wealth, population, and power. There is indeed a connection between supporting a high tariff and opposing secession. The North fought for all those delicious dreams of national predominance in future ages, which she must relinquish as soon as the Union is severed. We love the Union because it renders us now the equal of the greatest European power, and in another half century will make us the greatest, richest, and most powerful people on the face of the earth. Wow. I mean, in this article here, he's giving you a lot of jewels about the history of Abraham Lincoln, let's see, and Thomas Jefferson. Let's see. Let's see. Jefferson forthrightly held that where the national government exercised powers not specifically delegated to it, each state has an equal right to judge the mode and measure of redress. He assured Madison, confident in the good sense of the American people, but if they did not rally round the true principles of our federal compact, he was determined to sever Virginia from that union we so much value, rather than give up the rights of self-government in which alone we see liberty, safety, and happiness. All right. Jefferson thought large standing armies were a threat to liberty and an invitation to tyranny. Lincoln proved he was right. All right. Let's see. Jefferson, he owned slaves. He did not free them. He was born into a world where slavery was commonplace. Jefferson was arguably one of the greatest opponents of slavery of his time. He tried to condemn it, but his clause was deleted. The king has waged cruel war on harmonization itself. That is true though. It was lots of clauses. Jefferson did make this clause. I read about this in another book. I can't give you the name of that book right now though. So take that how you want it. Take that with a grain of salt if you must. Lincoln's record is well known. He opposed it. Habeas corpus. You just talk about secession is revolting. You know about that. But this again just gives you a lot of history on some of this information. Send them back to Africa. This is though reality sometimes broke in, Lincoln persisted in his colonization fantasy until well into his presidency. For a man who prided himself on his rationality, his adherence to such an unworkable scheme is puzzling, but not inexplicable. His failure to take account of the overwhelming opposition of blacks to colonization stems from his lack of acquaintances among African Americans. So he didn't make a lot of black friends, it seemed like. Just a little bit more. There was something else here. Okay. All right. This is in conclusion. Down here. Blah, blah, blah. Lincoln's libertarian. All right. In 1831, long before the war between the states, South Carolina Senator John C. Calhoun said, quote, stripped of all its coverings, the naked question is whether ours is a federal or consolidated government, a constitutional or absolute one, a government resting solidly on the basis of the sovereignty of the states or on the unrestrained will of a majority, a form of government, as in all other unlimited ones, in which injustice, violence, and force must ultimately prevail. The war between the states answered that question and produced the foundation for the kind of government we have today. Consolidated and absolute based on the unrestrained will of the majority, with force, threats, and intimidation being the order of the day. Throughout history, force appears as the arbiter of the moment. Confused. His writers. So when he talks about his book, this is again Tom DiLorenzo's book, Lincoln, the Myth. The Real Lincoln, a new look at Abraham Lincoln, his agenda, and an unnecessary war. I don't have the book particularly. It's a very interesting read though. Not that much money. Found it on Kindle, paperback. All right, I got one other thing I wanted to show you guys. One more little nugget. Like I said, a lot of stuff in here. So, if you ever need to hit a brother up for some information, feel free. No, I don't think it's in there. Go. All right, y'all. I'm not gonna be able to get to that. All right. So one more thing for the night before I go. Then I wanted to talk about slavery in New York. I'm from New York City. The history of New York has always very much intrigued me. You'll find out so much about the rest of the world and the rest of America just from starting with New York City in and of itself. Remember, it was the commercial capital of the nation, for a reason. And its development is extremely crucial to how the nation developed and understanding the many different concepts. So I just wanted to get this article. It's a really short article. Y'all bear with me. This is going to be our last tidbit for the night. To date, slavery in New York is coming to start in the mid-1620s and end in the late 1820s. Our records begin earlier and end later because we consider enslavement as a functional status enabled in practice in a range of ways. Functional status of enslavement involves degrees of ownership of the enslaved person, subjugation of the will of the enslaved person, social and legal alienation of the enslaved person, and that person's family and children. Records of slavery as a legalized, authorized activity appear in 1725 in New Amsterdam and end in 1829 when the process of gradual abolition under the 1799 abolition law and a subsequent amendment and refinement was completed. However, we include records of enslavement starting in 1525 and records of fugitives from enslavement during the Underground Railroad period prior to and during the Civil War, when fugitives from Southern state enslavement were captured and subjected to re-enslavement under prevailing federal and state law. Okay, remember, this is John Jay, College of Criminal Justice. All right, Esteban Gomez in 1525. Esteban Gomez sailed with Magellan's fleet with the early 1500s. He was commissioned by King Charles V of Portugal to search for a northern route to China. Gomez explored and mapped a series of river inlets and bays, including the Hudson River, which he later called Deer River. He did not find the route he searched for and instead returned to Portugal with 58 indigenous persons to sell as slaves. Whoa. Persons who we might today call Native Americans. He did not find the route he searched for. He returned to Portugal with 58 indigenous persons. This is a clear example of reverse transatlantic slavery. King Charles disapproved and semi-freed Gomez's captives, assigning them to various families as servants. Interesting, as servants. It is uncertain where these people were captured from, but it is possible that some came from the area we now call New York. There is no doubt that a slave ship explored the lower parts of the Hudson River. John Rodriguez was a crewman of the Dutch ship Jonge Tobias. The ship left what is today Manhattan. The capital left John Rodriguez behind, either because of a dispute or in order to signify possession of the site. Rodriguez did not regard himself as enslaved, but he was a mulatto man who was forced to work for his captain without compensation. As the first non-indigenous resident of what is now Manhattan, he acted as a free man. So in the database, his record is tagged free, signifying that he was a free person who had previously experienced a form of enslavement. The African Burial Ground biographical summary explains John Rodriguez or Juan Rodriguez, depending upon the source, was the first non-native to settle in New York City. Raised in a culturally diverse household, his mother was African and his father was Portuguese. In the Spanish settlement of Santo Domingo, the Dominican Republic, John was known for his linguistic talents and was hired by the Dutch captain, Codicis Volkens Mosel of the Jonge Tobias to serve as the translator on a trading voyage to the Native American island of Manhattan. Arriving in 1613, Juan soon came to learn the Algonquian language of the Lenape people and married into the local community. When Mosel's ship returned to the Netherlands, Juan stayed behind with his Native American family and set up his own trading post with goods given to him by Mosel, consisting of 80 hatchets, some knives, a musket, and a sword. Emancipations in 1644. The Dutch Colonial Council decided to partially emancipate 11 people from servitude. Let's see the petition of the Negroes. Oh, very interesting. William Kieft, Director General on the Council of the New Netherlands, having considered the petition of the Negroes named Paulo Angelo, Big Manuel, Little Manuel, Manuel de Reus, Simon Congo, Anthony Portuguese, Gracia Peter Santini, John Francisco, Little Anthony, and John Fort Orange, who have served the company for 18 or 19 years, that they be released from their servitude and be made free, especially as they have been many years in the service of the honorable company, herein long since have been promised their freedom. Also that they are burdened with many children, so that it will be impossible for them to support their wives and children, as they have been accustomed to in the past if they must continue in animal company service. Therefore, we, the director and council, do release the aforesaid Negroes and their wives from their bondage for the term of their natural lives, hereby setting them free and at liberty on the same footing as other free people here in New Netherlands. Interesting. Among the people emancipated in 1644 was a person called Gracia, which is Portuguese for grace. Her name appears in a document. She may have been the first enslaved woman. However, another emancipation in 1663 was for Macon, an old and sickly black woman, to be granted her freedom, she having served as a slave since the year 1628. Okay. Slavery after 1827. Slavery officially ended in New York 1827. Did not apply to persons enslaved at the time. Gradually emancipated children of enslaved mothers born after the enactment of the law. However, in 1817, another law was passed to emancipate enslaved people from before the enactment of the law in 1799. However, the 1830 census records 75 slaves in New York State. Slavery existed in other ways. Out-of-state slaves temporarily visiting, permitted slave owners to bring enslaved people into New York State, fugitives and slave ships. Interesting. But yeah, just to show you that there's plenty of public information out here. There's more than 38,000 records of slavery within the state of New York from 1825 to the Civil War. This stuff is all out here to grab for you. You know what I'm saying? This is free information. People are on the computer all day, on social media all day. There are articles, all right? There are essays. There's free PDFs. There's tomes. There's literature. Get out there and do the research. This right here is Noble Drew Ali's prophecies, oral statements and prophecies. I'm big with the Noble Drew Ali. I look deep into his work. You know what I'm saying? That's what got me into this movement to begin with, is with Noble Drew Ali. Everything should start and end with the Noble. If nothing else, he needs to be included, along with all the other great and wise ancestors who brought us most of this information that we get today. Again, this is Vinny L. Y'all, Vinny no Moor. Giving y'all another crucial breakdown. Just something light work. I'll be back. I got more podcasts coming soon. So y'all stay tuned for that. Y'all hit me up on Facebook, VKid_Pursuit of Enlightenment. Instagram @VKid_, VKID_. Peace and love, family. Good to be with y'all. Happy Labor Day for those who working. Peace, man. Peace.